Hey everyone, I'm here today on the Heal My Cosmos podcast, and I'm Jenilee, and I want to talk about the upcoming Taurus new moon. So the Taurus new moon is exact on May 16th at 25 to 26 degrees of Taurus. I say that because it's 25 degrees, 58 minutes. So it might as well be 26 degrees. And so just keeping that degree point in mind, if you're someone that looks at your own chart and you want to see where those 2 degree points are in your chart, you could see where this new moon / new beginning is happening for you. So the sun connects us with the purpose of the present moment, right? So the transiting sun is always bringing to light what the current focus really ought to be. The moon connects us with the emotional undercurrents, right? So if the sun is on the surface and in the spotlight, illuminated, then the moon is the undercurrent of what's going on there, right? The emotional underbelly of what that is. And so each month at the new moon, the sun and the moon meet up at the same degree point. So in this case, at 25 degrees, 26 minutes, or 25 degrees, 58 minutes of Taurus, we have the sun and the moon coming together. Now, the sun and the moon come together every month, although this is an interesting conjunction because we have a couple other planets involved here. And we're going to talk about that. So we have the planet Mercury, right? So Mercury is our messenger planet, the planet that helps us receive information, give information, whether that's through speaking, writing, any form of information exchange. Mercury is the one facilitating that. And so Mercury is actually currently at 28 degrees of Taurus. So that's really just 2 to 3 degrees away from the new moon, right? Conjunct the sun. And so that's a big deal, right? So that means that Mercury is highly involved in this new moon, because usually it's just the sun and the moon conjunct. And this time around, we've got this planet of communication coming in. This is the later degrees of Taurus, right? So we only have 29 degrees of each sign, right? It's really 30 degrees because it starts at 0, but it's really just a degree away from this finality, right? Anorectic degree of Taurus. And so there's a lot of symbolism in that, right? We have a Taurus stellium, which is this cluster of Taurus planets coming together. They're all personal planets, right? So they all highly affect us as these human beings having this spiritual experience, or vice versa. They all affect us very personally. And this symbolism, it gets, the plot thickens, because then we have Uranus and Gemini, right? So Gemini is a new sign, but like I said, this Taurus cluster, this stellium, ends at almost the final degree of Taurus, so the very end of Taurus. And so then we have Uranus and Gemini at 1 degree of Gemini. So again, that's only a few degrees away from this cluster of Taurus planets. So Uranus and Gemini is also highly involved in the new moon energy, because Uranus is the only outer planet in these cluster of planets that are all kind of tightly together. And outer planets, unlike personal planets, affect us on a much larger scale. They are more worldly, they are affecting the collective, right? And so when you have an outer planet that's highly potent, affecting the collective, conjunct and working with these personal planets in a different sign, right? So it's an out of sign conjunction. So an out of sign conjunction is powerful because they are two very different energies, but very close together, having to have a conversation, having to speak their different languages to each other. They're kind of, in this elevator that's broken down, and they have to communicate because they're all kind of locked in there together. So we've got this planet Uranus at 1 degree of Gemini, only 2 degrees away from Mercury at 28 degrees of Taurus, and 5 degrees away from the Sun and the Moon in Taurus at 25 to 26 degrees. So these 3 planets in Taurus sit in their quiet, peaceful, safe container and can't help but be aware of Uranus and Gemini's close proximity, right? They're all on that same elevator, as this is an out of sign conjunction. So imagine that these Taurus planets are curled up under a weighted blanket, receiving texts and emails and waves, inviting them to a neighborhood block party by Uranus and Gemini. So the 3 planets in Taurus are taking deep breaths, very deep breaths, in solidarity with each other, as they do not plan to attend that block party because they are quite comfortable under their weighted blanket. Plus, there's food in the oven for dinner. Like this, there's no time for this. We're dedicated to this weighted blanket and dinner right now. So Uranus in Gemini very much marches to the beat of his own drum and carries on with the block party and continues to invite Taurus friends out to play. And the planets in Taurus very much to politely decline and stay in the comfort zone and peace, and maybe a little bit of denial that the future, right? So Uranus connects us with the future, right? The future timeline, future awareness. So with this cluster or stellium of Taurus planets under the weighted blanket, they might be in a little bit of denial around what is calling them forward into the future. Now, mind you, Taurus planets, Taurus energy was working deeply with Uranus for the last 8 years up until April 25th, when Uranus did go into Gemini. And so Taurus is not completely unfamiliar with Uranus energy, although there is this desire to just stay put in the simplicity of what stabilizes them. And so I painted this picture of these planets for you in this, elevator kind of trapped together, so that you can visualize how these archetypes are showing up in your life right now. Where are you being called out of your comfort zone in your own life? Where do you find yourself stubborn to open to trying something new? Where are you underneath the weighted blanket and deciding that that's where you're going to stay? Where are you protecting your stability to a fault? Like, how does protecting what you've built limit you from expanding into something more? What is your future self nudging you toward? And perhaps you've turned your head to those nudges. So as comfortable as each of us is in what we have built, we must choose to answer the call of the future now. We still have Venus in Gemini as well at the late degree of 27 degrees of Gemini. So she has been helping us lean into and be curious about what Uranus and Gemini is awakening within us and around us. She's getting us to question whether we can get on board with that. Like, can we create new values for ourselves that are on board with Uranus's plan to facilitate this journey into the future? So Venus in Gemini wants us to question our values very deeply. She wants to remind us that we can be changeable, and that we get to be changeable, that we get to choose to be changeable. We get to adapt to the life calling us forward and soften any stubbornness, right? So stubbornness is that the Taurus stellium energy. It's like, nope, weighted blanket. I'm not hearing anything else, right? And so we're being called into releasing and softening some of that stubbornness, choosing to take a deep breath and be curious what life is outside of that weighted blanket. We must use this energy to simplify any excess that is making the future feel out of reach and create a solid plan for the way forward. So there are currently 3 planets in Aries, including Mars, who is on his last 2 degrees of Aries before he enters Taurus. Mars is our planet of doing and taking action. This is a call to use that fast-moving Mars in Aries to get done what the 3 planets in Taurus, that cluster, that stellium of Taurus planets, what those planets have approved for Mars and Aries to actually get to work on. So Mars in Aries is having to at least sit with the idea that some of the things he wants to do aren't worth it, don't have staying power, they're not actually going to move the needle, even though he just wants to move in general. Mars in Aries is conjunct at the same degree point as Chiron in Aries, which connects us with our vulnerability and our soul wounding. So you can hesitate to move forward and take action during the new moon with this influence from Chiron. So you might find yourself questioning if you are enough of something. You could be questioning it. Doesn't mean that you need to be questioning it, but you could be, because of this vulnerability influence from Chiron. So be with those feelings and do it anyway. Chiron is here to help us along our journey to wholeness, and this new moon is about doing something that is ours to do for reasons outside of our human understanding at this time. Mars and Chiron in Aries are both in a sextile or an opportunity aspect, right? So it's an opportunity that has to be chosen, right? Opportunities have to be taken. They can be there, but are we going to take them is the question. So there's an opportunity aspect happening with Mars and Chiron and the planet Venus in Gemini, right? So Mars in Aries, Chiron in Aries, and Venus in Gemini, all in this opportunity to do something that nourishes your social life, right? So Venus wants us to nourish our social life. Venus wants us to take the weighted blanket off and go out into the neighborhood and check out the block party. Venus in Gemini specifically wants that. And Mars just wants to do, right? So there is this opportunity to do something that nourishes our social life, specifically with women and feminine energy in our lives, right? So considering your relationship with these feminine archetypes, right? These women identified people in your life, just really keeping all of that in mind is important as this opportunity is presented to us. So Neptune in Aries, right? Neptune, the planet that rules Pisces, connects us with our dreams, creates illusions, invites us into escapism, and helps us connect with our higher self. This planet of Neptune in Aries is also in a sextile or another opportunity aspect with Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto being the planet of transformation, deep healing, connecting us with the changes that need to be made in order to get things right. And in Aquarius, it's like, how do we get things right for the purpose of the future? So there's an opportunity between Neptune and Aries, Pluto and Aquarius within 3 degrees, and Saturn and Aries within 5 degrees. So Pluto brings temperance to the dream that we're spiritually nurturing, right? Pluto can see the future in Aquarius, and Neptune holds and nourishes our dream that we have in our lives. And so these two have an opportunity to remind us to always come back to we and think beyond I, right? So we, not I, with this opportunity. So what does it mean to take ourselves out of the I during this new moon and notice how everything that we're planning affects everyone else, right? that's something we want to consider with this sextile between Neptune and Pluto. And then with Saturn, Saturn is in this wider, less powerful sextile right now, but it's still an opportunity because Saturn and Pluto are very strong outer planets. And so we want to be present with it. I think it's mindful to be present with anything Saturn and Pluto are doing. And so, Pluto offers Saturn a deepened awareness of the future timeline, and Saturn offers Pluto an awareness that we're doing this thing one step at a time. Like, I understand that that's the future timeline and there's a process, right? We're going to do this one step at a time. And so I think it's really helpful to bring that into our own lives, right? To bring that awareness into our own little mini bubble of a life, right? Especially as we're leading into this full moon. Again, I'm not full moon. We're leading into this new moon on May 16th. So we are getting closer and closer to just being asked to sit with all of this, right? Being asked to sit with what is real, what is not, what has the power to sustain the future, and what does not. And when I was looking at this chart, I think it's very interesting because when you think about the astrological wheel starting with Aries, we have planets in Aries that are saying, okay, I am this. We've got planets in Taurus that are saying, okay, and I'm going to build this. We've got planets in Gemini who are there saying, okay, and I'm going to communicate and get the message out about what I am building and who I am like this. And then we also have a planet in Cancer, Jupiter, that is reminding us of how we feel about it on a personal level. And because it's Jupiter, we're being asked to rise a little bit higher and reframe the way that we feel now versus the way that we have felt in the past, and really ask ourselves, do I still feel that way, right? In Gemini, do I still want to communicate that way, right? In Taurus, do I actually feel that this is stable any longer, or is this stable in the past? And then going back to that first sign of Aries, is this who I am anymore, right? So there's all of these questions, and there's planets in the first 4 signs of the zodiac, all kind of in this stretched out, not tight line, right? Unless you're the elevator with the Taurus stellium and the 2 planets in Gemini. But I think that it's a very interesting lineup, and it's going to continue to get more and more interesting throughout this year. And so, doing this work for yourself, receiving these downloads of these astrological forecasts, at least bi-monthly for the new and the full moon is so important, so that you understand, okay, how does this show up in my life, right? Because that's really where your part is. And, we all just need to be doing our part. And so I want you to keep your eyes peeled in the next couple of days for my new moon in Taurus guided meditation and energy healing video. These are really important to do as well bi-monthly, if not more, so that you can take responsibility for your own energy in this grand cycle of change that we're all in. And so if you sign up for my paid subscription, it is $8 a month that just keeps giving, right? You just keep getting these energy healing videos, meditations, all of these really rich spiritual tools that can help you along your spiritual journey. So thank you so much for being here. And like I said, if you're not already a paid subscriber, go ahead and sign up. It is an investment in your own soul's evolution, in your own future, in your own contribution to what we are all doing here on this planet together. So, again, thank you so much, and I will see you soon.